Aloha. Welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers, interviews with people who have special insight into education from preschool all the way through higher education. I'm Jim Shon, your host, and today we're exploring high technology for youth, and my guest is John Corey, the Northern Pacific Director of the High Tech Youth Network. Welcome to the show, and tell me about why it's the Pacific.
Well, thank you, Jim. The High Tech Youth Network has its origins in a project that started about 11 years ago in New Zealand. And it started out as part of the Intel Computer Clubhouse Network, and rapidly outgrew that model of, sort of a hardware-only approach to technology. And what happened was the focus shifted from giving kids access to computers to giving them access to the technology and the creative projects that the computers and the cameras and all of this high-tech gear could actually enable. So that's where we got our start.
So it went beyond, here's a laptop, here's an iPad, or whatever, to something in more of a learning orientation.
Absolutely, and creative, because people want to use this technology to create. So, YouTube wasn't around at the time, neither was Vimeo and all these other places to sort of publish. And so a lot of the kids really wanted to take their equipment and get their videos out, get their music out, get their animation movies that they were making, get them out and sort of get them circulated. So the real effort was to shift towards teaching people how to use the keyboard and mouse and teaching them how to use the tools, the software, and also go through the whole creative process. What do you do pre-production? What do you do during production? What do you do during post-production? What does it mean to distribute? What is intellectual property and how to respect it? And so all of those things were starting to become integrated into our program.
I see, and so, but this is also a place for them to come, right?
Absolutely. Computer clubhouses started out as being places.
Yes.
When we evolved it into the studio, we kept that idea of place. It's a permanent place, it's a safe place, it's a local place. And as a member, you swipe in and it's your place. Uh-huh. It's not a place where you're invited in, it's a place that you're a member of.
I see. And so these places you began setting up in New Zealand.
Right.
But is it just for anybody, or a particular group of students that you were looking at?
We originally targeted the underserved communities. Most of our grants and government money that was being allocated to us was specifically to go into communities which were already underserved. So a lot of the Maori and Pacific Island communities, our flagship studios went into those first. And that's also where we went into Fiji. Fiji studio is also a very underserved community. In Hawaii, we targeted Native Hawaiian communities, communities which may not have as much access to technology. Uh-huh. And so we, again, focused on communities where the opportunity to touch and feel and play with these technologies is limited.
Mm-hmm. So you have a number of these in New Zealand, mm-hmm. in Fiji, mm-hmm. Starting off in Hawaii now.
Right.
Other places in the Pacific?
We'll be going into Samoa. That's arranged. Eventually Tonga, we have capacity to go into Tonga. We're still just waiting for a few government things to happen to make that possible. We're taking a look at virtually any community that touches the Pacific right now. Uh-huh, uh-huh. And any place which hosts a lot of the Pacific Island people, because as a network, we're about connecting people, particularly the Pacific Island communities. So whether they're Filipino communities or whether they're Maori communities or Tongan communities. If you go throughout the Pacific, you'll find the ethnic communities of the Pacific all over the place. They're in Daly City in San Francisco, they're in Orange County in Southern California, they're in the Marshall Islands. It's all over. So to connect them is what we're all about.
I see. So technology is a connector. It's a invitation in. It's a tool, and this notion of kind of going all throughout the Pacific, it sounds kind of similar to what the Hokulea and Nainoa Thompson and others are doing with the sense of connecting indigenous underserved communities in particular.
Very, very similar. We realized early on that the internet was the enabler, and that as fiber, and the Pacific is full of a lot of fiber, but access
You're talking about underground cables.
Yes. It's all over the place. But to get onto that, to get access to it is important. And so many communities, the cable may run right up their beach and they don't have a way to connect to it. So what we're looking at and investigating is how to get those communities connected. And when they have that access to the fiber, when
Hi,
they have
I'm Chris
access to the
Leatham,
internet,
and I'd like to...
they also get access, of course, to things like Skype and all the different services that are free on the internet. And so that enables communities to come together. So every one of our studios, we usually have a large, usually 55-inch TV set, and every day all the studios are on, and they can interact with each other, they can mentor each other, they can ask questions of the expert in another studio, they can speak in their own language, whatever.
So this is like a 24/7 Skype jamboree going on here?
Absolutely, yeah. After school.
After school.
After school.
So that brings up another interesting point. This is not owned by a school. It's operating outside of that formal school.
Absolutely. Our initial studios often were built or we were lent space in local schools. But we have a studio in a rugby club. We have one in a city library. So we go wherever the space is available. We'd actually like to be outside any one specific school and catch all of the young people in the neighborhood and bring them in. Because sometimes it's a little tough to, cross that school fence and go inside. So if we can move outside, that's great. But we also do community studios in the school and operate sometimes during the day, whatever's convenient for the students.
Now, you had said to me that you're not teachers.
No.
And you're not really trainers, you're kind of more mentors. You want to talk about that distinction that you like to make?
We make the distinction for two reasons. One, we don't believe learning originates by teaching. It originates by someone who wants to learn. And so when someone says, how do I do this? Where do I go to find out this? That's a question that generates learning. The teaching comes when the mentor says, okay, I'll show you. Or here's where you can find that. Our mentors are often other students in the same school. They've done it before. It's the older kids sometimes mentor the younger. But sometimes it's the younger who's getting experience on a project, and someone says, whoa, how did you do that? Time-lapse photography. Can you show me how to set the camera up for that? And so that type of learning, that type of mentoring goes back and forth all the time. We have virtual mentoring sessions. We have someone who's an expert, let's say, down in Dunedin, maybe an expert in a particular piece of software. They've worked with it and they've done some wonderful things, created some beautiful animation, let's say, or a 3D object, and they want to share it. Well, they can get on the system and set up a virtual mentoring session, and anybody who's interested can join in.
So if I want to participate in this Pacific-wide, exchange, I would need to go to a high-tech youth network studio and kind of voluntarily become a member and try to figure out what I want to do, and then be able to talk with people wherever.
Yes, yeah. And we encourage young people from as early as 8 or 9, all the way up to stay involved up through their 20s. And we sort of say, 8 to 25, that's sort of the range. So, we don't exclude someone because they're a little younger and they came with their older brother or something. There's no sort of guideline that says, if you're not exactly 13 years old, you can't come through this door. We don't do that. And so, nor do we kick people out when they turn 18. Matter of fact, we encourage them to stay on and to become mentors, to be involved in the program, or to take up some of our other projects, which are oriented towards career development, entrepreneurship, or college entry.
So talk a little bit about if there is a profile of a type of student who would wander into your studio. I mean, in terms of age, in terms of their circumstances. You mentioned underserved communities. Is there a kind of prototype that you see more of, younger, older, whatever?
Curious.
Yeah. Okay.
So everybody who comes in, they share one thing in common. They're very curious. They want to know. And our job is really to foster that and to make it a lifelong thing, not just, I'm curious how does this work. If you show me, I'm leaving. No, if you're curious about this, you're going to be more curious about that. And so you develop that pull on curiosity. And then you start to develop curiosity into creativity, and you bridge their imagination into reality through giving them the skills to use the tools.
So if I'm a new curiosity seeker here, I wander in, do you give me a kind of range of, let me show you some of the things that other students have done. You kind of give me a sampler of...
Absolutely.
Because I may not know what I don't know. Yes.
Well, in general, you came in with someone else. One of the other kids brought you in. They're going to show you. They're going to show you what they're doing. And you can sit down with anybody, and they're going to show you what they can do. And you can look on the wall, and we'll show you on the wall what projects other students are involved in. Because the studio is all about projects. If I want to do something with Photoshop and learn to use the Photoshop tools, well, I can bring up Photoshop, but I have to have a photo to work on. That becomes a project. And so once you get that project going and you start learning how to use Photoshop and put a mustache on that friend of yours, then you can post that project up on our social network. You can save it to your archive. You can put it in your portfolio. And over time, you develop all these projects you worked on. And those become a permanent record, the curation of all the knowledge you've gained.
So I have a portfolio which is not only what I've sort of learned, I guess, technologies I may have played with, products I may have created. There's a whole range of those things, right?
Yeah. Most of the projects are based on content. So you create a video, you create a animation, you do a 3D printed object, you send it off to have another object cut out on a laser cutter. You may have produced a song, written a song, and recorded it. And you may have edited your recording. So all of those things that you can then store.
That's fantastic. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with John Corey about their approach of drawing youth into curiosity and projects. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on ThinkTech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you center stage.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, Reformers. We're talking with John Corey, who is the Northern Pacific Director of High Tech Youth Network, which has just come to Hawaii. And I understand that other organizations like OHA and the youth are generating videos and describing your approach. This seems to be a regular product of like documentation and documentaries and them being drawn into the video world.
I think the thing which young people like to do is they like to talk story. And to do that and preserve it, they get up in front of the camera. So we teach them how to shoot each other, essentially, and develop videographies and documentaries of things they're interested in.
So we're looking at a kind of time-lapse thing, and this was produced by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, is that right?
Right. The background, the time-lapse photography that is in the background of this documentary was done by a 14-year-old from Hilo, from the Connection School.
I see.
And he's developed quite a following on YouTube with his videography.
I see. So this is what we're looking at, what the people are seeing is actually done by youth themselves.
Right.
So they come in and they pick a project, and then is there always someone around that knows how to help them with their particular project, or is...
Well, hopefully the studio producer knows most about everything that's in the studio, but sometimes they don't know a specific piece of technology. So that's why the virtual mentoring system works, is that maybe I don't know how to use After Effects as well as someone else.
Yes.
So I can find out who does After Effects and get on a virtual mentoring session and ask my questions.
So generally, we've come to understand that the upcoming generation is much more comfortable with technology and computers and video things than maybe we were when we grew up. Are you seeing this as a real, somehow it's tapping into an existing curiosity, interest, familiarity with the world of technology that previous generations might not have had?
Absolutely. When, my generation, if you were interested in technology, you were probably a ham radio operator.
Right.
You listened to code.
Yes.
And so the next generation, you became interested in technology. You fooled with cars. And I think as time goes on, each new types of technology, you want to become familiar with. You're a kid. You're curious. What do I do? How do I get into computers? Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's got an iPad. Most people have a Xbox or some sort of game console at home. How do you use that? How do you become proficient at it? But what can you do beyond the simple? What can I really do with it?
Well, it does strike me that always trying to find ways to remember all the different moving parts and nuances. There are a number of phrases that begin with the letter P that seem to stand out. One is project-based learning. It is project-based.
Yes.
It's not an abstraction. It's not, let's do Algebra 3 today.
No.
It's all oriented towards, in part, producing engineering, which is part of STEM, and creativity. The other is that it's the personal choice of students. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
as when you enter the studio, if you're a young person, you start to incrementally add technology knowledge to your repertoire. As you get a little older and you've been there a while, you realize that this can lead to something. I'm pretty good at almost all of the Microsoft Office stuff. Where can that take me?
Yes.
And I'm pretty good at Adobe Creator. Where's that going to take me? And so we give a little bit of guidance and help young people set up what we call a personal development plan.
Okay.
What do I want to learn next? How long is that going to take? Do I want to get a certificate for that? Do I want to put some projects in my portfolio? Do I want to clean up some of the projects I have and make them look better? So we help them develop that personal development plan. And then that, of course, is backed up by the actual project portfolio, which is that combination is very powerful when you go out to apply to the university, you're applying for a job. It's better than a resume. You can take in examples of what you've done. You can show the certificates you've achieved. You can talk to an employer about your knowledge of a specific tool or tool set. And those are very powerful things in getting into the workplace. But also I think it gives you an introduction to some entrepreneurial activities. Hey, if I can do this with a laser cutter, I can start building this product. And maybe I can sell those. And so we also mentor students on the concept of entrepreneurship and understanding what a business plan is, understanding how to look at the market, find out if that's practical. Is it possible? Does anybody want it? Can I make money doing it? All of that. So we help them in that respect as well.
So the personal learning plan, I'm interested in that. Of course, we have that idea in a very different context for special ed, where there's a personalized plan. At a recent conference by the Educational Organization of States that are, get together regularly, they're also talking about personalized learning. What does that plan look like? Is it like, what am I going to do? What am I going to be in 5 years? Or is it the project? Or what's going on with that personalized plan?
It's actually sort of like a personal blog.
Blog.
You're talking to yourself.
I see.
Here's what I want to do. I want to learn a little bit about how do you curate the knowledge of your grandmother. So my grandmother is 89 years old. I want to find out what she knows about something. And I'm going to take the camera and the recorder and go over and talk to her. So that's how I'm going to learn about curating knowledge.
I see.
So we try to take ideas like this and foster those. So put these in your development plan, because someday you're going to want to show this yourself. It's something that you want to put into your personal portfolio and keep forever. Or you may want to say, hey, animation is so cool. I've got this idea about an animated character. I'm going to have to learn animation. Here are the animation tools I want to learn how to use. So I want to learn this one, I want to learn that one, but let's start with this one, and I want to go attend the online tutoring session on that tool so I can learn how to set up a project in one of these animation suites. So those are the types of approaches that young people will take in developing a plan. They may also say, oh, I'd love to be an architect, but there's a whole lot of engineering I need to know. And all that engineering is going to require math.
Yes.
So what math skills am I going to have to be better at? And where am I going to get the help to get better at those? And how am I going to be able to apply those to my desire to become an architect? So is it engineering math? Is it geometry? And where am I going to find that?
It does sound like, I'm imagining students are going to your studio and coming back to their regular school, all excited. And they're saying, teacher, this is what I'm doing. And they're saying, huh? You can talk a little bit about how your studios might be drawing in teachers who are curious about why Jimmy suddenly is, the light bulb went on and he's,
We encourage, if we're associated with schools, we always encourage the faculty to come over and see what we're doing and what the kids are doing. And most important, we like to share with them and with their parents and the rest of the family. So we have a day a month or so that we actually do a showcase. And the showcase is really a way for the members to show off what they've been able to do, what they're working on. But also it introduces both their teachers and their parents, everybody else, to what is possible. Because they did this on their own. We didn't have a little book that said you have to do this by the third week.
right.
None of that.
Yeah.
They did this purely on their own volition. Nobody said you have to. Nobody says you must. It's always been an option.
So they go through the regular school day, and then it's 2:30 or 3, and boom, they go rushing over to your studio. And
That's it, yeah.
how long are these studios open?
Usually at least 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And when they come in, a lot of times they don't, they maybe sit down in front of the computer. They may find a beanbag chair and sit down. And they can use the studio any way they want. Sometimes there's a little competition if we have a sound booth or something where someone wants to go practice or play or record.
So these studios have like little musical recording things with them?
That's, many of them do. Matter of fact, we're getting ready to start doing one here in Hawaii that has a better recording area in it. And sometimes we'll work in conjunction with the local recorder if there is one, if we really want to do high quality work. But we try to do audio. We try to have a green screen for doing motion capture and videos. We always have a little space for doing robotics. Most of the studios either do VEX robotics or they do the Lego. So you can sit down and play with robotics. You can build up your robot. We do electronic projects. We have little circuit boards and you can set those up, and sometimes with little computers you can program. Or someone says, hey, I want to do a video game. So our rule in the studio is if you want to play a video game, you got to develop it.
Oh.
And they do. They develop, and they'll develop multiplayer video games.
Really?
And then they'll play them.
Oh, okay. So a studio is not necessarily computers and just people looking at screens. It's maybe recording. It's got that video thing, which you're saying is very popular.
And of course, you have to rehearse. You don't just shoot the video.
Well, of course you have to rehearse.
So you see a lot of that going on.
So you have students watching the others doing their own projects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even outside the studio, one of the things we set up early on was a social network, similar to a sort of a Facebook on steroids, but closed. And it's only for members, and they share with who they want to share with. They share what they want to share, so they can keep stuff private. They can put all their stuff up on it, and they can blog, they can communicate, they can do all the social networking things you can do on some of the open social networks. But we do it in a closed fashion, and we focus on the things which are important for the studio and for the kids who are doing it.
Well, this is fascinating because we do have a multiplicity of technology applications, uses, interests. We're talking with John Corey about the High Tech Youth Network and their studios developing in Hawaii and throughout the Pacific. We will be back in 1 minute.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. That's Ted Ralston. Ted is the host of Where the Road Leads. It shows every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. It's about technology. It's about how people collaborating and solve problems with modern technology. It's where the road leads. We all know that. We should all be listening. Join us there, 4 to 5 p.m. every Friday. Now, what about that do you agree with?
All of it.
I knew he'd say that. Aloha. Say aloha.
Aloha.
Good.
Aloha, how you doing? I'm Gordo the Tech Czar, here on ThinkTech Hawaii, where we co-host Hibachi Talk. where we talk about technology and bring in all kinds of cool guests. Also, my co-host with me today is
Andrew the security guy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching ThinkTech Hawaii, and thanks for watching Hibachi Talk. We also have Angus.
And you there, lad. It's Angus. I bring in all kinds of wee things. Oh, look, you can see my lips moving.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. We're talking with John Corey about their incredibly innovative studios where they draw students in to do projects, peer group, mentoring with each other. And I wanted to ask you, it sounds to me that these studios are within a community, involved with schools, or at least school children. So what is necessary in the community's attitudes, interests, the school, bureaucracy, not bureaucracy, for this to work?
Number one, someone has to have a passion for wanting to serve young people and help them out. And they take a look at what we're doing, and if they think that this is a good fit, then they invite us in, because we only go where we're invited. So, and it doesn't have to be a school. Sometimes it can be organizations within a community, and the schools and different groups, and they say, we want to do that here. They may want to have a very sophisticated studio. They may want to build a purpose-built place. They may want to have this a community studio, a small in the classroom type. So we can do all of those. You see, you're watching the Alvin Ray Smith interview at the Studio 274.
This guy was the founder of Pixar?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he came by.
He came by, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And inspire the kids?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So we, matter of fact, some of our students have worked on Pixar projects,
Yes.
including my daughter.
Oh, really? So the community has to want it, right?
Yeah.
Or somebody has to want it, right?
Yes, yes.
But, often there's no community there when you talk about technology and community's attitude towards it.
That's a problem. And so one of the things we do right off the bat is we do a project initiation. And the project initiation says, let's do diligence. Let's sit down and see what the resources are available here, what the need is, what the real movers behind it would do to get it done. Mm-hmm. And normally we find a champion in the neighborhood. Sometimes it's the principal, sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's someone from a rugby club. Yes, it could be the local librarian that says, hey, our community needs this. When that happens, then we start working on the details. We'll survey the whole community. We'll find out what resources it has.
How will you survey them? What does it look
We
like?
normally use something like SurveyMonkey, or we may just ask parents and local people, and sometimes and the students as well, because we want to know, do they have access to the internet? Mm-hmm. Do they have other technologies in the home? Do they know about these technologies? Are they interested? Mm-hmm. How do they feel about having a place that would help the community get engaged with these types of technologies? Mm-hmm. So we'll determine, do our diligence, determine what the needs are, what the desires are, and then how we fit. Do we build a little studio? Do we build a big one? Mm-hmm. Do we invite, a big neighborhood catchment area, or do we just catch the kids in that one little school? And we've done all of those. We've been in small little schools. We've been in big schools. We've been in purpose-built studios that capture from a number of different communities. And all of those work, but it takes a lot of conscious effort and a lot of coordination and collaboration among all of the people who are stakeholders to bring to bear something that'll make this work. And that we've been successful in many communities. Sometimes the government steps right in. In the case of Fiji, they said, we want it, and we want it here, and that's what they got.
Is this what we're looking at, Fiji?
Yeah, that's our Fiji site.
Uh-huh. So you're not just sort of wandering in and plunking it down.
No.
This is a lot of legwork, building that base
That's right.
so it can be sustained, right?
Right, and it doesn't necessarily start out big. It'll sometimes start out small. And so we have different levels, community studios, we have lead studios, we have flagship studios.
Well, looking at who is the more willing partners here, it does sound to me that underserved communities, are you a little more rural than you are urban in terms of interests where you found?
It has a tendency to be that. Underserved communities have a tendency to be not downtown, or if they are downtown, it's really underserved.
Yeah.
But they do have a tendency to be further out. It's always transportation problems.
Yes.
And so one of our things which we tried to do is organize the transportation, making sure that we have a way to get the kids there and home safely.
So it's a little bit like starting a school or a charter school or whatnot,
Absolutely.
where you've got to get the kids there, often they don't live next door necessarily.
No,
you know.
and if they miss their bus, how do we get them home?
Right. Oh, okay. So that could be quite a challenge. It's a challenge for regular schools, I
It
know.
is, yeah.
And it does sound to me that, now, okay, in Hawaii, tell me what you're doing in Hawaii, what that landscape looks like, where you're growing
Well, we started out in connection schools in Hilo.
in Hilo. That's a charter school.
That's a charter school. John Thatcher, the principal there, thought this was what he wanted and made it happen. Allocating space, putting in a studio producer that really oversaw the whole day-to-day operation and connected with the youth. Because the studio producer is really the uncle in the studio.
uncle, yeah.
And he's got to really
Uncle
be there.
John, come on in, here's your cookies. Or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the attitude they take.
Yeah.
They're not there to, as John says, they're not the sage on the stage.
Uh-huh.
They're their uncle. They're going to be there to facilitate and to make this thing fun. And that's what it's all about. If there's no pleasure, it isn't going to happen. No student walks in, swipes his card to be bored.
Yeah, right.
He's going to have fun.
Yes.
And so that's what the studio producer does. And so Hilo has been very, very successful. That has grown and grown. It's produced some really amazing talent. They've joined up with Neil Scott's Makery, and so the students there can use some very elaborate, expensive, and generally hard to get at technologies to produce laser cut materials, to work in wood, and to do 3D projects on milling machines, not just a simple desktop laser or 3D printer, but really production quality work. And so that's another project we're working on.
So you started out in Hilo, but you haven't stopped there.
No, we managed to get a grant from OHA, and OHA wanted to get Hilo's help to produce new studios in Kauai. So one in East Kauai and one in West Kauai. So our first one was Kawakini Public Charter School, which is a Hawaiian immersion school, quite small. And so we put a one classroom size studio in place. We put a good studio producer in there, Uncle Shane. and so they started out about 3 months ago working on getting that up. Very popular is Photoshop, very popular is 3D printing. So they're adding more skills, more techniques. And now we've got 2 more studios going in Kauai. We have one going in at Waimea High School.
Uh-huh.
And in conjunction with a media teacher, Miss Evans, she's going to be the mentor. She's going to be helping those kids, not as a teacher of media, but as helping them make sure that they get engaged with the studio.
So you're marinating the project-based brains of schools and their
That's
existing
right.
teachers
And then now we've got interest and have just signed an agreement with the principal at Kapa'a, Dan Hamada, and he's going to allocate a fairly large space out of his new project to move a studio into there and to start developing some of these programs at his high school. So that's all very exciting. We just had a press release on that, and it's been a good time. I think there's a lot of future over there in Kauai. But our longer term goal, our real strategic goal, is to get into into Oahu, and look at some of the same communities we were looking at with OHA on Kauai, looking at places like Kalihi, where we think there's a lot of underserved community there. There's a lot of Pacific Island students there. There's a lot of desire. We just have to find the space. We have to find the community support to get the space, provide the funding to get one of those studios set up here.
So you had mentioned you have an actual numerical goal of students engaged, right, by a certain time?
We're, on the Pacific wide, we're sort of targeting around 44,000.
Wow.
And, right now we have between 8 and 11 studios in all the way up and running down in New Zealand. We have Fiji, we'll have Samoa, we'll have 4 studios here, maybe 5. In a fairly short order. But as we get larger studios, we're also going to bring on smaller studios. So we're looking at maybe bringing on about 100, 140 smaller studios. And they will serve the bulk of the access, because we're finding that because of the distribution of people in the Pacific, it's big studios. You might find Kalihi might be good,
Yeah.
but in Kauai we have to have 4 or 5.
Right. And transportation becomes an issue as well.
So as long as the studios are closer, the transportation is less of a problem.
And you were also mentioning that one of the potential sustainability strategies is that these students would be producing products and services that they could actually sell and bring back money to sustain these projects.
It's actually happening now. In some of our studios, we have what we call the tech shed. And it started out as a place to learn production techniques, to learn product development techniques, and to do fabrication, primarily using the 3D printers and the laser cutters and things like that. But in doing that, we have found, and to a certain degree, I think, in the product area with Neil Scott's Makery, that there is a market for those products. But also we have the other side of that, which is digital content and creating web pages for people.
Well, you've taken students from wandering in at 8 years old through becoming entrepreneurs. This is a really exciting kind of movement. I wish you more success. And we've been talking with John Corey, the Northern Pacific Director of the High Tech Youth Networks, which is expanding into Hawaii, a lot more opportunities for Hawaii's youth. Thank you very much, John. Join us next week, where we'll be talking with the new president of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. Aloha.